Namaste and good morning, everyone. Let's start the class with the prayers. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parbrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Bhurbhuva Swaha, Tatsavitra Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi, Diyo Yo Nah Prachodayat, Asto Ma Sadgamya, Tamso Ma Jyotirgamya, Mrityurma Amritam Gamya. Om Sehna Bhavatu, Sehna Bhunaktu, Seviryam Karvavai, Tejasvi Navadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahi. Om Shanti 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 Om. Let's open our Uddhava Gita books. We are on chapter 4, page number 125, and verse number 9. So as you know, in this scripture, conversation is between Lord Krishna and his cousin and friend and devotee, Uddhava. So let's see. What is Lord Krishna telling? What kind of a message he is giving? Actually, he is telling him to understand all this and go to Badrika Ashram and teach this to the Rishi Munis over there. So because he knows that he got to let go of this material body. So he's sending his ambassador over there to do some part. So verse number 9, chapter number 4. Nirodho utpatyehe anubrihan nanatvam tat kritan gunan antaha pravishtaha adhat evam dehe gunan para. Just as fire manifested from wood takes different shapes according to the condition of the fuel, the embodied soul enters various material bodies and thus accepts varieties of bodily characteristics. Although fire may be sometimes visible and sometimes not, the element fire always exists. Similarly, the soul may appear within a body and then depart, but still the soul is eternal. It is a mistake to impose material conditions upon the spirit soul, who has nothing to do with the material body. As fire is sometimes blazing, sometimes great, sometimes small, and sometimes extinguished, the spirit soul is sometimes born, sometimes in the body of Brahma, sometimes in the body of an ant, and sometimes departs from the body at death also. Fire, although separate from the object it burns, appears in various ways as big, small, blazing, or extinguished, according to the condition of the fuel. I mean, we have seen that when we add fuel to it, it could be ghee, it could be oil, it could be anything we add in there, and it just blazes. In the same way, the spirit soul, being averse to the Supreme Lord, identifies himself with his gross and subtle bodies, although he is distinct from them and eternal. Verse number 10. Yo asau guner virchitaho deho yam purushasya sansara stanan nibandhoyam unsoho vidya chid atma. The subtle and gross material bodies are created by the material modes of nature, which are creations of the illusory energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Material existence occurs when the living entity falsely accepts the qualities of the gross and subtle bodies as being his self. So that means when we forget in reality who we are, we just become conditioned with these bodies. This illusory state, however, can be destroyed by real knowledge. The question may arise that since fire is produced from wood, and fire has never been seen independently of any fuel, it may be assumed that the existence of the soul is dependent upon the gross and subtle material bodies. The answer is that only through the Supreme Personality of Godhead's knowledge, potency, vidya, can one clearly understand the nature of the living entity. By such real knowledge, one may cut material existence to pieces and even in this lifetime experience spiritual reality. Our material existence is an artificial imposition by the Lord's inconceivable potency of nascence. The qualities of gross and subtle material forms are imposed upon the living being. And because of misidentification with the body, he initiates a series of illusory activities. When by the mercy of the Lord, the conditioned souls are freed from the material conception of life, having revived their original consciousness, they become free from material bondage. Those living entities who are averse to the Supreme Lord forget their constitutional position and become conditioned by material existence, so that they consider their gross and subtle bodies as their selves. However, a pure spirit soul is not bewildered by material existence, which keeps the rebellious souls under a spell of illusion. तस्माच जिज्ञास्येह आत्मनम आत्मास्थम केवलम परम संग में निर्सेद एदत vastu buddhim yathakramam. Thereafter, after careful consideration, one should approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the cause and effect of everything, while renouncing the false conception that this world is an independent reality. So the spirit soul is covered by gross and subtle bodies. One should understand that the spirit and soul is completely distinct from these gross and subtle material bodies. Gradually, on the strength of one's sadhana, one should rise above the conception that the material body is the self. So that means learn to detach from this material body while you are living in this material body. Just like we know that we are not this house, we live in the house, but we are not the house. The same way, this body is another house we live in. When one comes to the platform of self-realization, he should inquire about his duty and then dedicate himself to the service of the Supreme Lord. While engaged in devotional service, one should remain detached from thoughts of enjoying the objects of the senses, which are all creation of Maya. It is only due to a lack of inquisitiveness that a foolish person fails to attain knowledge of the absolute truth. Number 12. Acharyaho ranir adhya syad ante vase uttararani tat sandhanam prakanam vidya sandhi sukhavaha. The spiritual master is compared to the lower kindling wood. The disciple is compared to the upper kindling wood. So in old times, they used to have two woods, which was called arni, just rub them against each other to create fire. So the spiritual master is compared to the lower kindling wood, the disciple is compared to the upper kindling wood, and the instructions imparted by the spiritual master are compared to the wood placed between these two. The fire of knowledge that is produced by the interaction of these three destroys the darkness of ignorance and gives happiness to both the spiritual master and the disciple. Because over here he's talking about sadhana, how to do the sadhana. Sadhana can be done at the feet of a guru. The knowledge received from the spiritual master is capable of burning ignorance and its effects to ashes. When two sticks are rubbed together, the friction produces fire. Similarly, the spiritual master imparts instructions to his disciple, and this knowledge destroys the disciple's ignorance, burning his desire for material enjoyment to ashes. Knowledge of self realization is produced by linking the living entities who are conditioned by Maya with a spiritual master who is in full knowledge of the absolute truth. Just as fire is produced when one rubs two sticks, the knowledge of self realization is attained by the disciple who is under the shelter of the lotus feet of the spiritual master. That's why we see that even the God incarnate, they all went to their gurus to get this knowledge. Number 13. Veshardihi satihi vishuddh buddhi धुनोति मायाम गुण संप्रसुताम गुणाश्च च संदध्ये यद आत्मम एतत् स्वयं च शायते असमिद यथा अग्नि. By submissively hearing from a bona fide spiritual master, one receives perfect understanding that dispels the illusion of material existence, which is due to the influence of the three modes of material nature. So ignorance is because of this Maya. And this ignorance gets reduced and ultimately gone away with that. And that's why Uddhava is getting this knowledge from his guru, and he's telling him to give it to the Rishi Munis in Badrika Ashram. Ultimately, the quest for perfect knowledge ceases when one has become fully satisfied on the spiritual platform. Perfect knowledge comes from the expert spiritual master, and it removes the bondage to material existence created by attachment to the gross and subtle bodies. We are all familiar with this gross body, the Sathul Sharir, subtle body, Man Buddhi Chitankar. All of us have these gross and subtle bodies. After establishing one on the transcendental platform, where one becomes absorbed in thoughts of the Lord, the fire of knowledge becomes extinguished. Just as fire is extinguished after all the fuel is consumed. Okay? Just as fire is extinguished when there is no more supply of fuel, similarly, a disciple who receives transcendental knowledge from the expert spiritual master is able to free himself from the clutches of the three modes of material nature. Only then the intelligence is purified and one becomes inclined towards the Supreme Lord. So this is what the sadhana we need to do. Detach ourselves from this Maya. Okay? So on one hand, he says, yeah, this knowledge you need, then you practice it, that ultimately you are one with God. That is what transcendentalness means. Now, three verses go together, 14 to 16. Let's look at them. What is he saying? So 14 is Ath esham karam kritnam bhoktriam sukh dukhyo nanatvam atha nityatvam lok kalaha gamatmanam. Number 15. Manyase sarvabhavanam samsthaha autpatiki yatha tat tat akriti bhedena jayate bhedyate chadhi. And number 16. एवं अपि अंगः सर्वेषां देहिनां देह योगता काला वे वतः सन्ति भावा जन्म आद्यो असुकृत. My dear Uddhava, I have thus imparted perfect knowledge unto you. There are other philosophers, however, who arrive at a different conclusion. They say that the conditioned souls should engage in fruitive activities because they are the enjoyers of the happiness and unhappiness that are derived from the results of their work. According to this understanding, the cosmic manifestation, including the time, the scriptures, and the souls, are transforming in a perpetual cycle. Just as the objects of this world are constantly transforming, so knowledge based on such objects is also impermanent and ever changing. My dear Uddhav, if this philosophy is accepted, there will be no escape from the cycle of repeated birth and death, accompanied by old age and disease, as the living beings accept material bodies that are subject to the influence of time. So, what he's saying is that sure, there are other philosophies, other ways to look at it, but our goal is to rise above this life and death cycle. So, other philosophies won't take you there. Where this philosophy, which I'm teaching you, and if you do sadhana according to this, you will cross this ocean of sansar. Lord Krishna says, my dear Uddhav, in the instructions I have given to you, I clearly indicated the ultimate goal of life. There are those who would not agree with my teachings. However, such as the followers of Gemini, if you are inclined to accept their materialistic philosophy instead of my instructions, then listen to what I have to say about that. According to the philosophy of Gemini, the living entity is constitutionally the performer of fruitive activities. And such actions are the causes of his happiness and distress. The energy or nature that forms the world we live in, the time under which we are controlled, the revealed scriptures that lead us on the path of advancement, and the subtle bodies that are the medium through which we experience happiness and distress, although constantly being transformed, remain eternally. The living being need not renounce sense gratification, either due to understanding the temporary nature of existence or by seeing the world as an illusory creation of Maya. According to such a materialistic philosophy, the objects of this world, even the bodies of beautiful women, are temporary manifestations of an eternal nature. Thus, creation, maintenance, and destruction are the three phases of eternal existence. By executing fruitive rituals that are prescribed by the Vedas, one can maintain his aristocratic position, which affords him the possession of women and wealth, birth after birth. In this way, one can go on enjoying sense gratification eternally. Such philosophers say that the universe eternally exists in some form or another, and thus imply that there is no need to suppose that there is a God who created it. They claim that the cosmic manifestation is therefore real and not illusory. In this way, they defy the conception of an eternal soul having an eternal spiritual form, which is now covered by matter. They say that knowledge is derived from sense perception and is not coming from some kind of absolute truth, and therefore knowledge itself is subject to change, just as are the objects that it perceives. So he's giving the argument over here that sure, there are different philosophies, but there are always some roadblocks. So he says, what I'm teaching you, if you do the sadhana properly, you will attain that ultimate goal. In this way, materialistic philosophers conclude that although the material nature is ultimately transformable, it still exists eternally. By thinking in this way, such persons are more inclined to follow the path of advancing material enjoyment instead of the path of renunciation. They see liberation as a state of pure consciousness without any activity or variety. Indeed, many such philosophers feel that liberation is an abnormal state of existence because the liberated souls would be without any activity or enjoyment. Even if we accept for the sake of argument that their philosophy is correct, we would still have to conclude that a path of regulated sense enjoyment would never provide ultimate happiness, but instead would simply award countless miseries. For this reason, even from a materialistic point of view, detachment is in the living being's self interest. Okay, so that's why Vairagya and Abhyas, those are the two things to keep in mind. Verse number 17. Tatrapi karma nam kartur aswat trayam cha lakshyate bhogtu saha cha dukh sukhyoho ko nava adho vivasham bhajet. Although the person who engages in fruitive activities hopes to become eternally happy, it is practically seen that materialists are mostly miserable and only rarely actually satisfied. This proves that the conditioned souls are not independent, nor are they in control of their destiny. When a person is always under someone else's control, how can he expect to get anywhere by acting independently? So that means if we think that this Maya will give us happiness, or Maya will give us liberation, or Maya will help us, how can we be happy? We are dependent. A dependent person can never be eternally happy. Sometimes we fool ourselves. We think we are happy by getting something. But he's talking about eternal happiness. Happiness which is stationary. It is practically seen that when one performs fruitive activities, he is still under the control of destiny and thus rarely achieves the fulfillment of his desires. If there was actual freedom, then who would have to suffer miseries? What intelligent person would allow himself to suffer the miseries of birth, death, old age, and disease? Therefore, the conclusion is that the living entities are dependent upon a higher authority. The performer of activities enjoys happiness or distress, being under the control of time. In modern times, inventions have been created to eliminate the inconveniences of life. But the maintenance and production of such conveniences has proven to be unbearably inconvenient for hundreds of millions of people throughout the world. Only the most foolish person will propose that there is no superior controller and that one can achieve favorable results simply by expert performance of material activities. Next one, verse number 18. Na dehi naam sukham kinchit vidyate vidusham api tatha cha dukham muda naam vritha ahankaranam parama. It is observed within this world that sometimes even a learned person feels distressed, whereas a great fool may feel happy. Therefore, it is simply a manifestation of false ego to think that by the expert performance of a karma, one can achieve happiness. It can be argued that a person could continuously perform pious activities, avoiding all sinful acts, and thus never suffer, because misery is caused by acting sinfully. The answer is that you will never find anyone in this world who is always happy or who is always distressed. Sometimes it is seen that pious men are in a miserable condition and sinful men are happy. The conclusion is that even pious men sometimes perform forbidden acts, and even sinful men sometimes perform unknown pious activities, such as traveling to a holy place or serving a saintly person. Okay, so this law of karma, that's what really decides all this. And we think that we know it all. We don't know. We don't know our past. We don't know what kind of actions we did. We always look at the fruits and we think that I am such a good person. Why am I suffering? Okay, there's no suffering, no pain without a reason. Okay, so we got to understand this philosophy properly. And right now, whatever we are doing, do it according to the words of the Vedas or the Gita. The living entities who are averse to Krishna are always under the control of the three modes of material nature. Because of this, whether they are in knowledge or in ignorance, they do not become lastingly happy. Verse number 19. Yadi praptim vighatam ch jananti sukh dukhyo te api adhana vidur yog mrityu na praved yata. Even if someone was able to somehow achieve only happiness and completely avoid distress in this life, he still would have to succumb to all devouring death. Because anybody who has been born will definitely die. That is the law. So even if one is very learned, he is certainly ignorant of how to stop death. Although learned people under the influence of the illusory energy of the Lord may display expertise in the field of achieving happiness and avoiding distress, they are still unable to save themselves from the hands of imminent death. Okay? And we all know that death is painful. Unless we have achieved that transcendental state where we have detached from the body also, which is a gross body, and from the subtle body also. And there's no suffering. Then the person has achieved that while living. Okay. Verse number 20. Ko anav artha sukhyate enam kamo va mrityu antike aghatam niyamanasye badhyesev na tushtida. Death is certainly very horrible. Since everyone in this world is just like a prisoner condemned to be executed, what actual happiness can be derived from the objects of this world and the gratification that they offer? If you say that there is happiness before death, the answer is that a man who is condemned to be die cannot enjoy the sumptuous meal placed before him. A person who is going to be executed cannot feel happiness, even if you give him nice sweet rice or milk cakes, because such things are simply a reminder that he will soon die. Therefore, this belief that wealth and sense gratification can give one happiness in this world of birth and death is herein refuted. Can the temporary happiness which is available in this world protect one who knows that he is always under the control of inevitable death? Palatable food offered to a condemned person is not relished by him because of the chilling thought of imminent death. Verse number 21. Shrutam cha drishtvad dushtam spardha suyet atpeye vaye bahe antaraye kamatvat krishi vach apihi nishvalam. The material happiness that is available in the heavenly planets is discussed in the Vedas. So that means those the loks, the Swarga loks. he's talking about. But it is simply a royal version of the happiness found on earth. Life here and life in heaven are both polluted by envy, deterioration, and death. So that means even in the heavenly abode, in the Swarga, people live longer, but ultimately it has to end too. And envy is there too. We read all kinds of stories in the Puranas. Just as a farmer has to contend with many problems while growing crops, such as a drought or the attack of insects, similarly, the attempt to become happy, whether on earth or in heaven, is fraught with many difficulties. After concluding that there is no happiness in this world, it is being described that there is no happiness in the heavenly planets as well. The information that there is ample happiness in the heavenly planets is illusory. In heaven, there is arrogance because one person is envious of others' happiness. And there is destruction when once accumulated IT is exhausted. As agriculture is troublesome and sometimes unproductive, the performance of sacrifice and other pious acts which award one heavenly residence is ultimately of no avail. When the farmer plants his crops, he has to worry about so many potential problems, such as defective seeds, drought, plagues of insects, excessive heat, and so on. Similarly, the attempt to enjoying happiness in this world, whether on earth or in heaven, is accompanied by anxiety due to jealousy, cheating, and so on. When conditioned souls interact, there is naturally competition and envy because that is the very nature of material existence. Due to the influence of time, no position within the material world is stable. And so, when there are reverses, violence and intrigue create great disturbances, both here and in heaven. Even the attempt to attain a heavenly destination is also fraught with many difficulties. Therefore, one should inquire about the eternal abode of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which is far beyond the disturbances of this material world. So instead of thinking that we'll reach those heavenly abodes, seek that ultimate liberation. That should be the goal of our sadhana. And that's exactly what he said in Bhagavad Gita also. But over here, he's going into a little bit more detail for Uddhava. Verse number 22. Antrayer avihito yadi dharmaha swa anushishtata tenape nirjitam sthanam yatha gachati tat shrinu. Even if one properly performs Vedic sacrifices and fruitive rituals without committing any mistake or offense. So that means a person is going through the Karam Kand in detail. The result of attaining the heavenly planets obtained by such activities will be destroyed in due course of time. Listen as I now explain this to you. Even if one avoids mistakes and offenses while performing Vedic rituals, it is impossible to avoid the miseries felt at the time of destruction. This is being described in the following 5 verses. Unless one very carefully executes religious rituals, various obstacles will come in his way. But even if one is able to perform such rituals properly and without encountering any obstacles, the result obtained is temporary because whether good or bad, all material conditions are imperfect. See, perfection is only in God. Verse number 23. Ishtevaha devata yagye swarlokam yati yagika Bhunjit dev vat tatraha bhogan divyan nij arjitan. Pious people attain the heavenly planets by worshipping the demigods with the performance of Vedic sacrifices. And again, demigods are the Devtas. By means of their accumulated piety, they enjoy heavenly pleasures just like the demigods. The demigods award their worshippers their desired goals. People who perform Vedic sacrifices to please the demigods attain the heavenly planets as a result of their worship and thus enjoy heavenly pleasures. Such enjoyment, however, is temporary, and the worshippers of the demigods have to return to earth after exhausting their pious merit. So come back as a human being, and then there's another chance. So only as a human being we can attain that ultimate. So same philosophy, lot of words over here, lot of detail over here, but the message is the same. Let's do a couple of more. Verse number 24. Swa punyaho pachitehe shubhre viman upagiyate gandharve viharan madhye devi nam hirde veshadhrik. After ascending to the heavenly planets, one who had previously performed numerous sacrifices will ride in an effulgent celestial chariot, which is awarded as the result of his past pious activities. He is glorified by the Gandharvas and dressed in gorgeous clothing as he enjoys life in the company of heavenly damsels. So the word Devi in this verse refers to the Apsaras or celestial women. Okay. Verse number 25. Istri bhi kamag yanen kinkni jal malina kridiran navedatma patam sura krideshu nirvrita. In the company of celestial women, the enjoyer of the results of sacrifice travels to heavenly gardens in a wonderful airplane, which is decorated with circles of tinkling bells and which moves according to his desire. Being relaxed, comfortable, and happy in heavenly pleasure gardens, he does not consider that he is exhausting the results of his previously acquired piety and will soon fall down to the mortal world. Because person forgets. One thing is that sure, it's a longer life than a human life, but still there's an end to it. A person forgets. Even as human beings, we forget that we have to leave this body. We see everybody living around us, but we think we're going to be here. And that is not the case. The phrase Kam Yan means traveling at will in his celestial aeroplane. So that is like an outcome of some good deeds. Because good deeds were done to have the fruits. So this was the fruit. Okay, got that enjoyment, went to that place. It's just like whatever he wished, he got it, but ultimately there's an end to it. It's not eternal. Swarag Lok is not eternal. So just like on the Prithvi, we know that nobody can live here forever. No matter how much we exercise or eat good food, ultimately we have to go, leave this body. The same thing is true other places. Only thing eternal in us is the Atma. So through the sadhana, that's what we need to recognize. What is our real nature? Real nature. Okay, that is the goal of the sadhana, to know ourselves. That's why every faith, they talk like that. They say, know thyself. Atam darshan. So, and nobody can bless us with that. We have to do our sadhana. Guru can show us the path, just like Lord Krishna is telling us, giving us the detail. In fact, warning us that do not fall prey to the glittering happiness which is temporary. Keep in mind that ultimate goal. Okay, so next week we'll start with the verse number 26. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaye Purnameva Vishishyate Om Shanti 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 Om. Thank you very much.